So I very much look forward to the summit. Thank you again for organising. Look forward to the summit, but above all, look forward to continuing to work with our African partners and the new dynamics after the summit. Thank you very much.
Merci beaucoup, ambassadeur. Nous sommes, même s'il est en train de tanguer quelquefois. Ambassadeur Shinkaï, vous avez la parole. Professeur, est-ce que le technicien pour la PowerPoint presentation? Ok. Le technicien était en train de dormir. On voit sur le grand écran, mais... Ok. Donc, professeur Touré, vous avez la parole.
Merci, je voudrais faire une précision. C'est un titulaire de famille. Je l'ai fait parce que la relation de l'Afrique du Nord, nous avons accès à une relation je voudrais faire des visites historiques, utiliser la société citoyenne, ce qui est lié, c'est que je peux appeler post-colonialisme. Aujourd'hui, nous sommes dans une nouvelle ère de post-décolonisation du post. Allez-y, vous pouvez voir. First, donnez slide. Donc là, on est dans le partenariat de l'outil. La question qui se pose est de savoir comment sortir de cette crise. Il y a une tentative de raisonner guerre, Lisbon, c'est cette question. Alors, je voudrais rapidement passer sur la première partie de l'éducation. Parce que malgré que l'Afrique soit une menace, on a constaté que c'est toujours ces réflexions de la nation. Donc, dans un premier temps, on a essayé de solliciter ça de l'institution, et c'est là ce que d'abord, il y a eu ce qu'on appelle le vieux concept de l'Afrique, qui consistait à se trouver pour exploiter l'Afrique. Et développer la fin, et se rendre compte qu'il fallait associer l'Afrique pour créer une troisième force pour protéger l'Union soviétique et les États-Unis. Mais ce concept n'a pas été cause de la fin de l'État partielle. Nous sommes associés à la reconstruction de l'Europe. Donc, les partisans africains c'est défendu ce principe. D'abord, les forces de la sport, si vous faites un dossier de situation qui a été grâce à la France, il y a non seulement montré à ses partenaires que c'est le pays sous-développé qu'il faut régler, mais aussi il faut les garder sous fermé. Parce que la nationalisation du Canada de Suez et la guerre en Algérie sont des facteurs qui ont contribué à la nationalisation. Donc, ici, le principe fait avec la réalité de l'ordre de 1953. Déjà, l'idée c'est le frontier, et la barre de commerce ici. Et est-ce possible? Il faut tenir avec l'Afrique, la part de l'Afrique ici, et initier une consultation auprès des justices civiles, en vue d'aboutir au livre ouvert sur les relations et l'Europe. Qui a arrêté les aspects de disposition du domaine concernant les aides et évidemment les accords partenaires. Donc on est passé d'une reconnaissance d'égalité de concession à une discuter avec l'égalité de concession et les accords partenaires. Donc les APE sont censés remodeler les partenariats sur de nouveaux axes comme le dialogue politique, la stratégie de développement et l'action de la communauté, l'établissement des programmes de commerce et de coopération. Le résultat, c'est que les affaires ne sont pas en cause des pertes et de la vie. Donc, le résultat encore, c'est la masse. Pour justifier comment on y arrive là, les Africains ont peur parce qu'ils ne sont pas à libéraliser son commerce. Pour ça, c'est au regard du partenariat sur les conventions autre chose, c'est que la situation du rang des économies américaines, ensuite, il y a beaucoup de pays qui dépendent du soutien du droit public. Voilà. Il y a la situation. Ensuite, il y a les rapports de force politiques, la capacité des Américains de l'administration. Parce que c'est pas obligé dans ce monde, il n'y a pas d'administration. Il y a le secret, dépend sur le secret. Qui détient le secret est puissant. Le secret militaire, le secret de défense, le secret commercial. Et en amont de toutes les négociations, c'est chiant quand on veut c'est un petit peu à vivre, des grands sujets mondiaux, des grands gentils, des princes, des chefs, des discussions. Ensuite, les grands d'information, on sait qu'il n'y a pas de il faut noter la fracture numérique, garder ces relations. L'Afrique est alors l'État dans ce concept de l'accès à l'Internet. Et je vais prendre le fait que ce qui se passe ici arrive là. Un État dans un État qui refuse d'appliquer la législation. Dans une ville où il y a des énormes taxes fiscales qui sont évoquées dans les marchés fiscaux et s'appliquent dans le bien de la possibilité. Ensuite, au regard des régions nationales, là aussi, au regard des paysans, il y avait l'intégration de l'État et de l'organisation. Dans cette phase, quelle est la responsabilité de venir voilà. Il y a beaucoup d'explications que les pays, les accords partenaires et les certificats. Donc, ce qui est compétitif, c'est que les partenariats compétitifs en place à l'aise. Une vision stratégique du développement. Cette fois-ci, il y a un autre politique franc et sincère. Non seulement des défis, mais aussi des agressions comme ça. Par rapport aux nouveaux défis dont se passe, les défis
Ok. Bon, vous avez 2 minutes.
les 2 minutes de alors, donc, le deuxième point d'aller vers une vision matérielle, c'est qu'il y a un renforcement pour appliquer il y a un investissement des partenaires traditionnels. L'émergence des nouveaux acteurs de la Chine, l'Inde, etc. Bien apprécié, mais ça peut être un défi parce que dans cette activité, c'est aussi un coût des ressources. Il y a une constatation et c'est un pays qui capte l'aide au développement par la vie. Et c'est les témoins qui sont faits, qui sont par la vie. Presque dans un monde. C'est le cas de la Chine, il a exploité les noms observés par la loi, et la Turquie fait la même chose. Pour conclure de façon générale, il y a une adaptation permanente et les relations euro-africaines à l'évolution sans c'est un vieux qui connaît les difficultés, il faut surmonter ces difficultés. C'est bien les appeler, mais ce qui fait peur, c'est pas jamais difficile. Qu'est-ce qui va se passer si les pays qui ont signé des accords européens vont signer ces accords-là avant le qu'est-ce qui va se passer si c'est parce que avec une vision partagée, il doit tenir compte des besoins de développement, des stratégies de la vie. Parce que le dialogue politique doit être sincère des défis. Et il nous donne des nouveaux pays sur la semaine. C'est une opportunité pour l'Afrique de se doter d'une stratégie de et pour les vers le fond traditionnel, de réformer la société. Cela ne veut pas dire qu'il faut rompre les relations avec les pays de la France. Il faut diversifier les partenaires. Cette diversification doit être plus pour nous. Je ne terminerai pas une crainte. Et la crainte, c'est que pas de Africains prennent les engagements, ils vont rester dans la coopération avec les pays et aussi, je ne veux pas que les Européens et les pays se concertent comme cela s'est passé avec le contentious. Merci.
Merci beaucoup, professeur. Nous voudrions ajouter que les relations Afrique-Europe, dont il est question ici, les relations depuis le sommet du Caire, qui sommet de Lisbonne, qui a adopté la stratégie conjointe. Donc ces relations-là, la stratégie conjointe, concernent toute l'Afrique. Vous avez titré votre document toute l'Afrique du Sahara. Donc ça concerne les pays partie de l'accord de Cotonou, les pays partie de bon voisinage et l'Afrique du Sud. Donc, nous parlons de ça. Il faut regarder professeur François. François, il a l'avantage d'être bilingue, donc on utilise son bilinguisme pour révéler la salle. Technicien. Oh, thank you.
Thank you very much, Chair. I want to thank Excellencies of guests speaking today. I want to thank the European Parliament who organized this event. It's a very important event, given that our head of states are going to the head of state Europe for partnership. That's very important for all of us. Europe and Africa have been in relation for centuries. And to refer to what Ambassador Gary Wentz said this morning, I think we have to speak the truth. And it is important for all partners. That's why my presentation will be very brief on 3 lessons for the future of AU and African Union relations. So at the preamble, we can see I'd like to quote this former professor of mathematics from the US who said, "We all must allow that truth is, but to deny it, denies the denier." But the problem is what it is. What it is the truth. That is another matter. But anyway, we have to have a devotion to truth. And for those who are believers, I quoted this part of the gospel. We say, truth will set us free. This means that we have to speak the truth in terms of our relation, in terms of what happened in the past, if we want to move forward quickly in the front relation. We have to ask ourselves, how is it that for centuries, again, Ambassador Quincy quotes Bono saying that, Bob Geldof saying that we're separated just for a few miles. How is it that on the other miles, on these miles, we have the highest developed countries of the world? On the other parts, we have some we could support, some we consider as the most impoverished people on the earth. This is the question that we have to face it. So, what is the truth of the AU and African relation? We have different answers. The first answer could be that AU represents wealthy countries, and African Union represents the most impoverished people of the earth. We can put impoverished people quotes here, but there are many figures. We can see it by GDP. I don't want to be very quick with that. The second aspect of the truth is that AU is a military power. European countries are powerful in terms of military. And we can even see that all the crises that we had in our continent recently, we were unable to solve it, and we had to go, or we have to go to foreign interventions. We are unable to protect our seas. We have to refer to international forces. Then, EU is a self-financing organization, AU is not. And then we have a number of truths that I'm not here to hurt anyone. And my thing is to try to go to the truth and to see from the truth where we can move from. Then we can go on, and there is also the thing is that we have the truth in terms of the history, we have the truth in terms of science, and this is where it is important from the African point of view. I will limit myself to two aspects of science. This diagram that you don't see, I presented it first to German parliamentary in 2008, and there were people they did not know about the science, the demographic revolution in Africa. This has never occurred on the earth. There is no sign, no place on the earth on history where we have this demographic dynamism. So this is something really unprecedented. I don't know if our rulers are quite aware of this. And this will have major consequences. Even the second graph that I will show you, you see that by the middle of, this is the second graph. This I have plotted it from the population. I compared the population of many regions of the world, including Europe and Africa. Of course, if you look at 1950, the population of Africa was 1/3 the size of Europe. 1/3. Africa was 1/3. In the middle of the 90s, it was equal. By 2000, Africa's population will be 3 times the size of the population of Europe. And this is, you have to see it in terms of the structure of the population as well. Meaning that you have one of the size in Africa is important, but the structure, meaning that this population is young. It will be the major power workforce on the earth. And this is a real asset from the size of Africa. And at the same time, the population of Europe will be aging. And I have an important quote by Helmut Schmidt, who was recently in Berlin, who was really lamenting that Europe is going through a real problem, in particular Germany. Then, in terms of size again, I will limit here, you have the land. People do not really measure what is the size of Africa. And we have to see that if you take Africa in terms of land, you can add in Africa Europe, America, China, and you still have space. This means Africa is very huge, and you cannot neglect Africa.
It is impossible to neglect Africa on the world. And when the drama was that at the end of when the Berlin Wall fell, people said, oh, we can neglect it. And this was a misjudgment, in my view, in the part of some European leaders to say, we will turn to the east of Europe. Africa is the word in those days was the benign neglect. And most of you may remember the famous economist cover that Africa, the hopeless continent. This was in 2000. And it was at the very exact time that China started to get into Africa. So there are many things. There is the history. I don't want to go. We know the history we have a blood history, centuries, slavery, colonization, neo-colonization. And we know that African voice is not very heard. And we even have the recent example of African voice not being heard, which was typical in the Libyan crisis. And I want to stand 1 second here to show that this is a real point of dissent. When Africa and Europe had a dissent, African voice were expressed by the African Union, and we know what happened. And now, I want to see, I normally want to make a lot of calculations from figures, from facts. I'm not here to defend anyone. I'm just here to see what the facts say. I went to see what the narrative was that Gaddafi was failing his country. The narrative at the time was that there's no democracy, human rights, economic development. What did I see? I went to check the Human Development Report in 2000, and I can compare many African countries. You have the figures here. I want to stop just on UK and Libya. And you can see that from 1998 to 2010, Libya jumped from this position to become the #1 in Africa. So at the eve of the war in Libya, Libya was by far the first in terms of human development in Africa. And you will see that the line, the UK line was just dropping down. So UK lost 16 positions in terms of human development index, while at the same time Libya gained 19 positions. So if you prolong these lines, you will see that by 2017, Libya could have been ahead and be the first country to pass above European countries in terms of human development. So one may ask, was this one of the reasons, the hidden reason for the war? This is a question that I don't want to touch on. Now, let us go to the blue. If you see that even though our history is very difficult, we can still look on the future. And this is the reason why we have a conference like this, because we can, even though we know that we have suffered, we have contentions, we have blood, sorrow, and tears among us, we can still look in the future with brighter and blue eyes. Now, I want to summarize my presentation in 3 things that will be on the organization lessons, and the value lesson, and the prospective lessons. Regarding organization lessons, I think that we have to be very humble and to know that we, at the African Union, we have lessons learned from the European Union. The first lesson with that European is organized not by type of geography, but on values. European Union, they aggregate on values, not on geography. That's why you have a procedure to be admitted. If you don't have the values, if you don't abide to the values, you not access to the European Union. We just admit because we are from abroad, we are neighbors, we can continue together. So we also have self-financing. European Union is self-financing itself, and this gives you enough room for independence, enough room not to be at the mercy of the ICC. You have enough room to implement your programs. You have enough room to decide in terms of your macroeconomic policy. These are the things that the European Union has. And I will insist on the 4th aspect, on the industrial policy. If you don't use industry, forget about economic development. And Europe, the European Union, they have industrial policy. Where is our industrial policy? This is a major step. Forget about fighting for poverty, fighting corruption. The key issue is industry in modern economy. China has done the same thing. Japan has done the same thing. The dragon in Asia, they develop because of industry. If we are not serious about issues of industry, please forget about all the talk we have. Then we values lessons. Here, I must start on the first, which is trust. Do we have enough trust as European health? As a cohesive, European Union is a cohesive group, and it is a cohesive group because they are cohesive on what they call their values. And they are very strong on their values. One of my friends was at the embassy of Norway in Paris. And during this Libya war, I asked him, how is it that Norway is participating? Libya has not attacked Norway. Why are you participating? Sweden, Libya has not launched anything to. But they said we are together at the European Union and in the NATO. So they are acting as a cohesive group because they have trust among them. This is a lesson that we can learn as well. Do we have enough trust amongst ourselves, Africa? The African states have enough trust amongst themselves. Then there is what I may call the cooperative arts. The cooperative arts to fight common threats. And there are many common threats now that we can fight among ourselves as Africans and in cooperation when needed with Europeans. But we must do the business, the homework ourselves. We must do it. We must be able, if we want to stand as sovereign nations, we must be able to do it. And I will say a word later on this aspect. Then the third thing here, which can be a point of contention with our brothers and friends of Europe, is that they should respect the choice of the leaders. They should respect the people's choice. When the people choose a leader they don't like, they should respect. We don't mingle into their affairs. I don't know why they should do on the same time. Then, it is not only a choice of the leaders, then the fourth point is what I call the choice of the political system. And I don't have enough time here, because what I've heard is something that I think this issue, I have a very big respect to Professor Farr and what he just said here, and also to Ambassador Quincy. And many people speak of democracy and presenting it as a universal value. I'm not sure. I want to demonstrate, someone to demonstrate it to me. I even had the opportunity, excuse me to speak about this, during the Libyan war, I had the opportunity in Paris to question Mrs. Hillary Clinton about this aspect. I asked her 4 questions. First, would it be possible for you, Excellency, to define what democracy is? Second, is the United States of America a democracy? And if yes, since when? Third, I have read the US Constitution from A to Z. You won't find the word democracy in the US Constitution. So I think African leaders, they are sort of blackmailed. They are under a new religion war in the name of democracy and human rights. And don't misunderstand what I'm saying. The opposite of democracy is not dictatorship. Democracy, and I can prove, if you give me the opportunity, that the US, even the framers, those who wrote the US Constitution, they were openly against the democracy. There was 39, only 36 of them said, only 3 of the 36 said they wanted democracy. That's why you will not find the word democracy in the US Constitution. If people are using the word democracy today, it is a sort of blackmailing African leaders. And I want our leaders to understand this. I'm afraid, I'm sick every time that people say, oh, democracy, we are fighting this, we are bringing democracy to Libya, we are bringing democracy to Iraq, we are bringing democracy to Uganda, without any respect of people's choice. Then, the question here to answer then is what I've called the triangle of sovereignty. Let me stay 1 second on this. I have a very practical aspect, a practical approach of what the sovereignty of a state is. In my view, and this is a result of years of research, I have written extensively on this issue. I have come to the conclusion that there are 3, if you are not sovereign in these 3 aspects, you are not a country. You have to be sovereign on the military. You have to be sovereign on the law. And all these issues of ICCP, of all these things, is because we are not sovereign. The United States doesn't bother because of ICC, because it's a sovereign country. China is a sovereign country. Japan is a sovereign country. We are not sovereign because we lack any beginning of sovereignty on these three aspects. So I repeat: military, law, and currency. And you can see on the currency issue, and I will stop here because I don't have enough time. Europe, again, is showing the way, even if they have problem with Europe. Africa, we are around 54 countries, isn't it? We have around 40 different currencies. None of this currency has any significance in world trade. How do you think that we're going to have a development with this aspect? Look, if you consider even Germany by itself. Germany is always a very powerful country. But why do you think that Germany feel that it is absolutely necessary for Germany to join the other European countries to form a euro? Because they know that today, in today's world, if you want to strengthen your triangular sovereignty, you have to sit it on the basis of currency. So I may stop here. I still have a lot to say on the prospective lessons, but you may see all the facilities. There are many things that still have to do. My sister here spoke about the reform of the European as the United Nations, but I will finish on one special issue, just to show you, and I think that if our leaders in April are tough enough, they could bring this topic. I'm speaking of the topic of the Chagos Island. If I say Chagos Island, people will not know what it's about here. They're talking about international criminal court. What happened here? Even Hitler did not do that. We have just finished completing a report on it. Let me remember, in 1965, Mauritius, the UK, instead of providing independence, they just cut a piece of the country and they created what they call British Indian Ocean Territory. And they were violating openly the UN Assembly decisions. They violated it 3 times openly. And they took part of the territory, and not only did they took this part of the territory, they deported all the populations. We are not talking of the 17th century or 18th centuries. We're talking of things that is happening right now. To people who are talking to us, are lecturing us on human rights, people who are lecturing us on the European Criminal Court, and I will finish with this. The European, listen to this, please. And I think that our leaders, if they can look us in face and say they are saying the truth, because I say that truth will set us free. The European Court of Justice on the 20th December 2012, the Chagosian people took their case there. They were dismissed. They were dismissed. This is a shame. Thank you.
Pour le technicien, il faut amener la lumière. Nous allons écouter le dernier intervenant sur cette question. Je voudrais Ambassadeur Shinkai, vous avez la parole.
Thank you very much, my brother Kwasi. I want to thank you for inviting me to participate in this event. And I also want to thank ECDPM. Both the Commission and ECDPM are my friends of long days, if I can put it that way. I'd also like to express appreciation to the two for organizing this meeting, which I think is important as we prepare for the 4th Africa-EU Summit. I want to remind myself of what we are supposed to talk about in this panel, which is making EU-Africa relations future-proof. My intervention will be taken from the previous interventions, particularly the first session this morning, where a review of the development of the partnership between Africa and EU had taken place, the instruments that had been used, how successful they were, what challenges they faced, and what we need to do for the future. Because of time, and I always respect my chair, I will not exceed the 10 minutes that I've been given. My view is that the Africa-EU partnership has evolved beyond the imagination of those who initiated it. As someone who was privileged to be part of the core group in Africa that negotiated with the EU the Cairo Plan of Action and Cairo Declaration, and having had also the privilege of managing the partnerships within the African Union for a couple of years, I want to say categorically that I believe that there is a world of difference between what happened when this process started in 1999, culminating in the Cairo Summit in 2000, in April 2000. And I'm talking now in terms of the discussions that took place between Africa and the EU representatives at the time. Some of you might remember that, in fact, the first impression on some European countries, or from some European countries, was that it was going to be a one-off event, and after which our heads of state would take the photographs, smiling and going back home. But the Africans insisted, along with those who were sympathetic to this in Europe, to say that, no, if we are beginning this process, we are not just going to go to Cairo for a photo opportunity. And that's why we laid the solid foundation of the Cairo Declaration with its plan of action. You know also that the next summit didn't take place until 2006 in Lisbon, largely because of the way the process was managed between the two organizations. And now that I'm a free person, I can say clearly that the main reason why this didn't happen was the fact that Africa insisted that if there is a summit between Africa and the EU, no African country, irrespective of its situation internally, should be left out. And if anyone was left out, Africa would not attend. We managed to arrange this process in 3 years later, so that second summit take place. And I think that it's a good thing for the two countries, for the two continents, that we have been able to ensure that this process has gone on uninterrupted since then. I think that the hardline attitude we had on some parts of the EU countries during that first summit has mellowed down. And I say this from the point of view of someone who had participated in the negotiations for Lisbon and also for Tripoli. I know that the EU has listened more to Africa than it did at the beginning of this process. So I think that it's a very good thing that we are able to celebrate it. However, as was said in the morning, there is still an issue of perception of how the Africans see the Europeans in this partnership. Whether it is correct or not, the fact is that, and the panelists agreed this morning, that there is indeed an issue of perception which needs to be managed. And that's why I agree with the panelists that there must be a change in the paradigm. We have to shift, and there is need to change the narrative. The second point I would like to make on how the EU-Africa relations could be made future-proof are the following. One, both Africa and the EU must agree on the priority areas for the partnership into the future and the mechanism to be used. On the areas of partnership, I understand that Africa has proposed that we reduce these from the 8 in the Lisbon Declaration to 5. Our European counterparts have suggested 3. When you look at the content of both, some would say it's really a matter of interpretation because there are many overlaps between the two. But I think for the African side, what is most important is the emphasis, and this is very critical, the emphasis that Africa places on development, the emphasis that the EU places on governance issues and related matters on democracy. I think that we need both, and we cannot really talk about human rights, democracy, etc., if we also do not talk about development. So I think that we need to have a meeting of the mind. With respect to the governance mechanism, I think that the JIES has been criticized, and I believe rightly so. However, what is the alternative to the JIES? My view is that we need to make it work better, we need to fund it better, and each side has an important role to play. But the first thing is that both sides must agree on how to proceed further. You will not, of course, be surprised when you hear me say that the recommendations that have been made by the African side with respect to the priorities, with respect to the working of the JETS, and the ministerial arrangements would be my recommendation on how to proceed further on this. Let me also just make a very few quick, more or less one-liner recommendations for this partnership to last. One is that both sides must make efforts to implement what they sign on to. 2, in dealing with this, there must be uniform application of policies and practices for all regions and countries. This is to say that what is done in one part of Africa is what should also be applicable to another part of the continent. Sometimes this is not always the case because the individual interests of some countries, both in Africa and EU, influence the application of the rules and agreements on countries or what happens in them. 3, as one of the panelists said in the morning, this partnership must be made more relevant to both African and European populations. In this respect, the involvement of the CSOs and the private sector is extremely important. The fourth point I would like to make is that we need to respect each other's values and practices. This morning, the issue of the gay rights matter was raised, and I think from the African side, it is not acceptable for one side to tell the other what it must do in respect of issues of that nature, failing which threats are made on what would come to them. As if people want to develop a partnership that we have, then threats and lack of respect for our own culture and value must not be part of the process. 4, we should agree to disagree, and I think that that's one of the panelists said that this morning as well. I agree entirely with this, and this is what I would strongly recommend for the future. But permit me to say that so far, where we have had disagreements on issues, and my brother Francois has made reference to Libya. I want to use that example as well, but in a different sense. I know that our approach on the African side was not accepted by the EU and its other partners. And therefore, they decided, along with the EU and NATO, to impose their own solution. I regret to say that perhaps if everyone had listened to what the African Union was saying at that time, the current situation that we have in the country, whose future we do not know still, might probably have been different from what it is. The sixth point I would like to make is that Africa must take its own engagements very seriously, and we need to be well prepared in our engagement with the EU. It goes without saying that because of the resources that the EU has, because of the long experience that it has, it's better organized and supported both materially and financially than Africa is. And therefore, if we want a partnership of some equality, we must take note of our shortcomings and make up for them by ensuring that in our engagement with the EU, we work extremely hard to get the best for our continent. The last point is that for the EU, it must not allow its own values alone to be to drive the process of the partnership between Africa and the EU. And in one of the papers that I received for the conference, I had a small quotation which says, Africa and Europe in partnership. 2 unions and 1 vision. From the discussions that we've been having this morning, today, and I believe elsewhere, we really need to clarify what we mean by that. Can we have the same vision? Can Africa and the EU have the same vision? I think that it's possible, but we need to work to get to that. And one very, very last issue is a cartoon that I saw in Gert's presentation today. I have the privilege of extracting a copy from him, and so many of you might not have seen it. It says, the title is Europe, Africa, a Good Marriage? And on top, I see something like China-Africa marriage. Then I see an arrow which says, I now declare you man and wife. I don't know whether it is Africa getting married to China, but I see someone at the corner lamenting, oh, Africa, I think I've missed a big opportunity. I think that the 4th summit is for that lamenter to claim back his wife. Thank you.
Merci beaucoup, ambassadeur Choukaye. Je crois que ça vous avez fait étalage de votre expérience dans le traitement du dossier. Et vous avez des choses. Chers participants, je crois que nous allons écouter l'intervenant de la dernière session de notre conférence. Ok, donc, je voudrais vous donner la parole. Tout le monde est... Sido, c'est l'éco-soc, l'Union africaine, connaît l'Union européenne aussi.
Thank you so much, Chair. I was quite only where I was seated, but no one required. My nevertheless, the discussion has been very interesting, and I think it's one of the most educated sessions that we have had in the whole process of leading up to the summit. But I want to bring a few issues on the table from the civil society perspective, because the next summit theme is investing in people, prosperity and peace. But it's starting to know that the civil society participation, and when I say about civil society, I'm inclusive of the private sector, the youth, and other matters, have been a very contested space. And I think this is one of the reasons why there is also limited and safe storage on the partnership. Our understanding is that this is a partnership of African and European citizens with their states and their institutions. You know, member states, their parliaments, you know, and other institutions, their commissions, and so forth. But the interaction from the civil society have been very, very problematic. I think the first encounter in 2009 is where we went to the meeting and found my delegation, Africa, and the other ones seated on the opposite side are also
challenges first, and we had to work towards doing that. I had confidence, Ambassador Shinkai, using his diplomatic tact, was very, very supportive in this agenda. And throughout the process, this has been what we have been quarreling with the European civil society. When you meet, they want to bring human rights watch, they want to bring FIDH, and our was, can we have indigenous European civil society because they will speak for European values and European citizens? Not these fly-by-the-night NGOs, they're in America, tomorrow they're in China, the other day they're in Africa. They have no values, they believe all, but they have their own international agenda which have no relevance to the values of the citizens of the country. And I think the summit needs to come out clear on that. Who represents Europe in terms of civil society is a big question. The second one is the issue of the political dialogue. It was mentioned in the morning that the last one was in 2010 in Norway. After that, our other partners began doubting to say, no, this is not relevant because the language is not, we want an open space and so forth. The political dialogue was killed, and therefore the policy-making processes also suffered, including the implementation. Now, the other challenge is the mandate of the institutions. If you are meeting in Brussels, the African ambassadors will not be present in numbers. It will be the European ambassadors. You're meeting in Africa, the African ambassadors will be present, but the European ambassadors will not be there. The reason is to do with the government mandate. My ambassador is accredited to Brussels and ACP. So if you have a JAD meeting at ACP, they will go to ACP because their terms of reference are very clear that accredited to that. So I think there's a need for political decision to institutionalize the JAD within the mandates of the representatives into the two capital cities, so that they become part of their accountability process. Otherwise, we'll be facing the similar challenges that we have. Secondly, the Cotonou Agreement is also coming to an end. And I think there is more potential in the JADS than in the ACP, because our challenges are not the same as the Caribbean. So we have our own African challenges, and I think the JADS should be the route through which Africa and EU should have a framework of engagement. The other aspect is the people-centered nature. Unless a deliberate decision is made, I've been to meetings from 2009, sometimes embarrassingly at my age, at my responsibility to be kicked out of the meeting. No, we don't miss society. And there's a question of European Union, because they know Africa will agree with you. But I think Ambassador Shinkai and his team were very, sometimes have changed that. No, from members of Mr. Demo and so on, so society can sit in the meeting. Then they moved from that to begin to fight ECOSOC. Say, now if he is coming here at ECOSOC, then let's begin to target ECOSOC. And this whole thing came even into our own capital here. The issue of ECOSOC, when it has an external driven influence, that this is becoming a more defined policy influence policy than to leave it loose so that birds can fly. Chair, I am with you, but let me just quickly finish on this. And therefore, our view is that the issue of conditionality in this partnership is irrelevant. Because if you begin to use conditionality, the EU becomes irrelevant with its engagement with Africa. You take, for example, Uganda. Uganda is now financing its internal budget at 82%. Now, projected in the next 5 years, yes, 97. So if there are 97 and you come with your conditionalities, what relevance would that be to Uganda or to
but the goalposts from our colleagues begin changing, which in my view has not been helpful to this. Finally, I think there is also a need to understand the dynamics of civil society. Africa has civil society, very credible civil society. Ambassador Olusegun is a former diplomat, now he's in civil society. Ambassador Shinkai may also be speaking freely now, you know, and many others who have had distinguished service. And this is a value addition to the process. I have sat in meetings, and one European Commission employee told me, the reason why we don't bring you as our civil society mostly is because ours are too young, that's more they're from school, and we fear that they'll mess us up. But that should not be the case. The case is that they have something to bring to the table. And the EU must begin to show that they have an obligation to ensure a people center. Don't be hiring Human Rights Watch, FIDA, and AHL, and other international organizations to speak on your behalf. Let's speak as European and African because we have values. They have values. That's what the partnership is supposed to be. Not the values imported from America or from somewhere else. In terms of human rights, again, the double standards. Yes, you're promoting gay rights. Fine. You are saying they are human rights. But we have Lusa, we have African asylum seekers in Europe who are treated like dogs and pigs. Those are rights also, which we ignore. But we know for sure that this issue of the gay rights, I hope my report will be out because I've been doing a research on this, is not related to the rights. It's an economic issue in Europe. They have so many asylum seekers who give the reason and we pay. That is enough to give them. So in order to avoid that, we open up the space where they come from. You understand? So that it's a big investment. It's an economic issue. And I think the person will agree with me when have an economic discussion. That look, our laws say when we are here and gays and receive 200 emails in a day or such a migration expert, what does the law say? The law say to criminalize us. So they have to kill. So to address that, they have to force Syria, they have to force Zambia, they have to force all countries open up for gay rights in order to stop the Africans are there. But these are discussions I think we need to bring on the table and we discuss. Director, thank you for giving me that.
Comme chers participants, on ne va pas. Je vais vous donner la parole, mais soyez très très bref parce qu'il est 17h et on va arriver à 18h. Ça, on va conclure sur une bonne note. Vous avez la parole. Et après, je prendrai une autre question. On va passer
I just want to reinforce the need for very robust civil society engagement. Not based on what my colleague has said. Yes, there have been government players. Now we are in this house. But events in the last few years have shown that future for African engagement premise on cross society. And what can see the difference? But of course, Africa has been making mine is organized last week, the summit of the 8 months. And also, there is a network of foundations and think tanks in Africa that is being hosted in Cote d'Ivoire under the EU UNESCO project on culture peace. It's not only when ideas come from Chatham House or Freedom House that it is rotated. I think we must look at our own and see what the think tanks as part of the civil society organization can contribute to it. I think that is the issue that I think that there is quite a lot of issues that we can have certain words that we use to mainstream whatever we have today. Frankness, pragmatism, relevance, collaborative efforts, and of course, mutuality. I think these are very important. I also want to believe that because there have been certain perceptions. When we talk about the universality of human rights, I'm just saying that because there have been some debates about the right to economic development, the right to shelter, and these are not justifying. And I think it is very important that within the context of this in partnership, there must be basic understanding. Finally, all issues about democracy. I agree with my, it's not that that's some universal context of democracy. We are not postulating in Africa there must be a tribal democracy, but the democracy that fits into the traditions of Africa. But what we are saying here is that there are certain principles, and it doesn't presuppose a level of development. Democracy does not presuppose a level of development and a level of democracy, a level of interest. But what is important is that all these issues need to be understood in the context of partnership. Partnership is going AIDS in the end. It's something that has not been really fully understood. We are not the same line with mortality, education, but this is an area that was armed as Africa to be able to do what it is really partnership and what we want to be. I think we are on the same track. And also it's important that we track implementation. I expect that there will be a post-summit engagement on brainstorming, track implementation of the from our government. So, thank you.
Le dernier intervenant, dernier parce que le temps. Comment? Une minute. Une minute. You have the floor, une minute.
Loving, amazed to see the perspective of the discussions. Next time, we will follow in life, industries, private sector. Secondly, I want to just comment on as in internal resource mobilization is very, very much. As in many actions, which implementation depend on that and side. As soon as funding that are available, implement project and African side. It's very important that we, the African side, we stress that. Secondly, I also want to stress the need for accountability for research. Actually, private sector, industry, export, and SME. Go to the best institution for country industry so then we tell you 4 years time we will have create that many number of staff. We will have that many industrial companies, whatever, access export market, and you know what we tell in Africa, our data of more than 5%. That's the at the same with the you know, because the link between the concept, structure, and the implementation is huge. So I think there's a lot of things for us to make. I don't know, 2030, but yes, we must be and the abilities to structure finance that accountability for government but also knowledge. I have not seen the use of advanced private sector development. And we are still struggling on those rules, SME, export, industrial development. So
in terms of the partnership, I think the EU can help partnership. Illicit capital. 420 billion over the last 10 years. Around 42 billion every single year. If Europe does not help, who will help? Then there is a lot for you. Illegal fishing is killing certain costs. Then I think Europe can help us. And also the component is extraction industry transparency issue. I think the use number is a time still has happened in that time. You see it happening. But once it happened, we are also interested. What has happened in other countries? If we don't have a just it's going to export. I think that's the thing I want to. That's the partnership. Let's focus on the area. Implement that you asked the list this morning. 70 action items. Nobody can implement. But 10 billion years ago. So it's on few elements that.
Merci beaucoup. Nous sommes à la fin de notre session. Je voudrais passer à l'intervenant très réagir et je vais donner 1 minute à chacun. 1 minute à chacun, mais il ne faut pas déborder. Celui qui ne veut pas parler, vous voulez dire quelque chose, ECDPM? À la fin, nous sommes à la fin.
Non, les participants.
Bien. Bon, Gary.
Well, look, I started this morning by saying we've got to change the way we look at each other, the narrative. And I'm really struck this afternoon by, I have to say, a level of negativity from some of the African speakers. And so I really emphasize looking back at historical wrongs that I and no one in the EU would ever seek to justify is not going to take us forward in our life. Now, if the EU had acted like that, Britain and Germany would still be at loggerheads. We came out of the biggest war that the world has ever seen. Finally learning that conflict doesn't do us any good. We have nothing to learn from Africa about waging war. Down the last 1,000 years, Europe has been battered. But we finally learned and have adopted more than 50 years ago a different path of Europe. I still hear, unfortunately this afternoon, Europe characterized as a group of ex-colonial powers, and that is incorrect. You know, as I said, the majority of countries in Europe have never been colonial powers. In fact, many of them have been colonies of the Soviet Union themselves and have become independent much more recently than many African countries and have had to go through the same post-colonial developments that many African countries are going through. But today, a number of African countries have higher per capita incomes than some of our European member states. So we have to sort of reset the agenda between us, and I really would plead as we go forward to really concentrate on the things that bind us together, not the things that have a tendency to drive us apart. I think things that bind us together are much greater than the things that push us apart. The fact that we don't agree on everything isn't a weakness of our partnership, as I say, it's a strength. And we should build on those strengths. We need to have an honest dialogue, and I don't think simply criticizing the other party for everything since the conference of Berlin is actually going to take us forward. I really don't think so. So we need to try and change that agenda. There is so much positive going forward in this market. And I believe that the summit is the opportunity for us to really take a step change forward. But we all have a responsibility. And whether it's African governments, European governments, African civil society, European civil society, private sector, the young people, we all have a role to play. And above all, investment that we made today. As the previous speaker has just said, and I totally agree, youth unemployment is one of the biggest challenges that is facing us in Europe and in Africa. We have every interest to work together. So I can really, really feel that we try to open our spirits as we go forward to Brussels. And it's in Brussels this time because it alternates between Europe and Africa, the summit, no other reason. As we go forward to the Brussels Summit, we go forward to something that will really build on people, prosperity, and peace in our country. Thank you very much.
Merci beaucoup. Nous allons continuer. François, juste un mot.
I don't want His Excellency the Ambassador to go with the issue, the notion of level of negativity. I said at the start that we have to speak the truth, and I said we can see, even though the past was written in blood, soul, and tears, we can see the future with fire. And if I have mentioned the issue of shackles, it's because it's not the past. It's an issue that is current. And you know the behavior of the British government has been absolutely inappreciable. And you know that this is an issue is on the ground. And I expect if African leaders, they want rights, they could bring this issue, and I want to insist on this, they could bring this issue in April. This is very important. Second point, on the issue of human rights and democracy, I don't want to extend on it again. I think that, again, African leaders, they should respect the political and economic system of other peoples. And conversely, we should ask other people to respect our economic and political system. This is not to justify dictatorship. And again, I can show that the opposite of democracy is not dictatorship. So, using the word democracy, it is against this word that I have to fight. And we can have discussion on this intensively. Otherwise, we have many aspects, many avenues on which we can cooperate very positively from Europe and Africa for the mutual advantage and mutual benefits of two peoples.
Bon, la représentante des ECDPM veut dire un mot.
Merci, Dr. Président. Non, tout simplement encore pour remercier les représentants. Je pense aujourd'hui, on a switch to English. We had quite a good productive discussion. I quite like the house analogy that we used in the morning. I think if you look at our discussions today, it was I think many people around the group are in agreement that there is a certain foundation. And the pillars that we're building the house with. And some pillars are strong, others are a bit shaky. The question now is how do we strengthen some of these pillars, such as dialogue and movement. The latest colleague from the private sector mentioned, for instance, illicit financial flows. And I think we still need to build the roof that will eventually protect us from future surprises and rain. Yeah, again, really to say thank you on behalf of the ECDPM, Dr. Kossi, and your department for allowing us to take this partnership forward. I think it's been very productive discussions.
Merci, chers participants. Nous sommes à la fin de notre session. Au nom de la hiérarchie de l'Union africaine, particulièrement au nom de la présidente qui a voulu être là, mais comme je l'ai dit ce matin, elle est actuellement au Tchad, du Lisbon Summit. Nos remerciements à vous, particulièrement aux panélistes qui sont venus. Sont venus partager avec nous leur compréhension